just love to learn, and I think it's a really wonderful thing to challenge the bias that we have, challenge the conditioning that we have, and always understand that what is true now may not be true in 5 minutes. It may not be true in a year. And I thought there was the most brilliant example of this through the LA fires, which no doubt many of us were watching live because it was so dramatic and chaotic. What stood out to me in that coverage was the morning of the fires coming down to the Palisades. I was watching a life coach, and every morning before she starts work, she'd do a mile around the neighbourhood. She'd walk a mile around the neighbourhood. And when she walked out, she saw the flames, and you could overhear in the audio, her saying to her neighbour, but I've still got to get my mile in. When it was so obvious that the flames were roaring down the canyon and were clearly about to take out the neighbourhood, her brain, she was so addicted to her routine that she was overheard saying, but hang on, I've got to get my mile in, right? She did go back, packed up her family and evacuated. And as we know, the Palisades were completely wiped out. But there was a very different story going on across the other side of the canyon. And that was a guy who a couple of years beforehand had seen how close the fires got. So he went out and bought sprinklers and attached them to the entire perimeter of his home. He sprayed his home in fire retardant. He turned the sprinklers on full ball, and then he evacuated. He saved his home. And what did not surprise me about that guy is that he was an army vet. He had spent his life training for change. He knew that the true definition of adaptability is not just about responding and reacting, it's about anticipating and influencing change. He was an active player in the signal of change that was so clear to him, and he wasn't going to be taken down by it. So I thought that was a brilliant example of two very distinct mindsets that kind of were fixed mindset and an open mindset. And for me, that demonstrated adaptability in its purest form. How am I not going to be reactive and a victim to change? How am I going to anticipate how that change is going to impact me and do something about it before it arrives? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I recently had Heston Russell on, former Australian Commander. Such a great dude. God, we had fun chatting in
legend.
here. And, we were talking about the high performance mindset of being a commando. And this idea that he explained around the kind of presence it takes to act with high performance.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that story because, I'm a relatively routine-driven person, but not so much that I used to be so routinely driven that the slightest change in routine would set my day in a negative direction. And I think it's because I'd attached the newfound success that I had and the newfound good feeling of, my energy and how I went about my day to the routine of my morning from my 5 till 9. But I realised pretty quickly that it's actually quite a fragile way to live.
Yeah, it is.
That this idea that your morning routine is the determining factor of your success.
Yeah.
Even for some people, for the week, it can be a chaotic spiral.
That's a disruptive... You're asking to be disrupted by the smallest thing then, aren't you?
100%.
Yeah.
And, I heard somebody say that, America was built on the back of men who slept 5 hours and smoked cigarettes. So it's an interesting idea to look at this, great to optimize when you can, but ultimately the goal should be to maximize.
You've got to be flex. You've got to be flex. Like, this is why I say to people, if you want to know how simple adaptability is, and if you want to start developing your adaptability, the book is filled with about 14 high AQ habits, but one of them I didn't put in the book. I don't know. It just didn't occur to me until afterwards, but is to order a different coffee every day, because even breaking that script helps you rewire, helps you be more prepared for change, helps you just be a bit looser and more flex with your mindset. And I would agree, you can't be anchored in everything being the same. And I think, again, that's why we have to deliberately counter what we love. Like I said, we're addicted to sameness. We are wired for routine. That's how our brains are built. And so when you challenge that, when you counter that script in really small ways, you start flexing the way you think about things.